Welcome into the College Football Power Hour, and let's get right to it because a game of that magnitude that delivered in the second half deserves zero, stepping around it. We're going to be totally honest with everybody. A little bit of inside baseball, a look behind the curtain. We had already recorded about the first 15, 20 minutes of this podcast, and during the fourth quarter of the Georgia-Alabama game, we were talking about how it was pure and utter dominance from Alabama, which, to be fair, it was in the first half. How it was welcome to the Kalen DeBoer era, how it was maybe, is the sky falling in Athens? And then Georgia figured things out in the second half, so we scrapped it all, starting from the top, but Alabama ends up getting the win. Fitz, just your initial reaction to that, a term that I frankly hate, but instant classic in Tuscaloosa.
But it was. This game was out of control, right? This game was a thorough butt whooping. And then what do we see? We see a touchdown after touchdown after touchdown, 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter for Georgia. And we were watching it, y'all. Like, we stopped everything and just watched what turned into be the wildest 5 minutes I can remember at the end of this game. And I don't know what to make of it, because if you ask me what we saw through 3 quarters, we saw Alabama just absolutely unload the cupboard in ways they hadn't. If you look at the numbers, Adam, nobody had blitzed less in the country than Alabama coming into this game. They were still getting home at an alarming rate. They tore all that up, and they sent the farm with exotic stuff from everywhere. Carson Beck was seeing ghosts. I don't think he was very good in this game for most of it. And this was clearly a statement that Alabama might be the best team in the country, and maybe we're overvaluing Georgia. And then the fourth quarter comes in. I don't know what the hell to make of that, Adam. I'm looking at a game that was really 2 games in one. Everything up to the fourth quarter, sheer domination. The fourth quarter, sheer domination the other way.
Let's not let Georgia coming back in this game take away from what Alabama did in this football game and in year one for Kalen DeBoer and what Jalen Milroe did on offense. I mean, to go up 28-0 against Georgia early on in this game, and then to find a way to win the game, to get an interception on the final drive of the game, to find a way to close it out. It was a beatdown by Alabama in the first half, and then it was a team that found a way to win the game when things didn't go their way in the second half, and everyone in that stadium was holding their breath, thinking, they've said on the broadcast, it was a party, and then it turned into everyone didn't know what was about to happen. And Alabama found a way to still win the game, so give them a ton of credit. Give their offensive coordinator, Nick Sheridan, credit for the game plan that he schemed up. I thought Alabama looked like the best team in the country, and their defense played lights out. A good plan all the way around. For Georgia, Carson Beck just coming back in this game was one of the best performances I think he's had in his career at Georgia. He didn't win, and he didn't play his best football, but to come back and lead his team to an opportunity to even be in that game in the fourth quarter was just awesome to see from a leadership standpoint. For NFL scouts are going to like it. He made some big throws. Listen, he's got to clean up the turnovers. You can't throw 2 interceptions. You can't fumble the football. But he threw for 430 yards in this game. I mean, it was a good performance by Carson Beck. Not great and too many mistakes, but I thought just his grittiness and his ability to overcome adversity was impressive, Caroline, when a lot of people were talking about if he even probably was the quarterback of the future for Georgia on social media in the first half.
Yeah. Okay. Called me out. I at least questioned.
That was done so politely, though.
I know. It was indirect.
It was indirect. That if I just totally wanted to go over my head, I could have let it. But I'll address it. Thank you very much. And I got plenty of people in my mentions after I tweeted that out. After Carson Beck was electric in the second half. Oh yeah. You want to say that again? No, I don't want to say that again. Okay. So I tweeted out when Georgia's offense wasn't doing anything after the second Carson Beck interception, when Georgia was in either a 3 or 4 score deficit, and it didn't look like there was any pathway to even closing that gap. I thought, okay, at what point do you consider making a quarterback change? Not for the season, not for forever, but just some sort of change to find some life in this Georgia offense. Turned out, well, the only change that they really needed was halftime, or really a majority of the fourth quarter. There's so many different angles that we can take to this game. There were so many different chapters in the book of Georgia, Alabama. It starts with pure dominance in the first half from Alabama. Jalen Milroe, what he was able to do with his arm and with his legs. Alabama's defense, how they got after Carson Beck early. You could see that they looked at Kentucky's defensive game plan a couple of weeks ago. They saw them get after Carson Beck early, how rattled Carson Beck got, and they just basically, Control C, Control V that game plan, at least in the first half. Like it wasn't even close. It looked like Alabama playing St. Mary's School of the Blind out there in the first half. That's one chapter. I think the second chapter is what Georgia was able to figure out offensively in the second half, because we've talked about it. We talked about it in our a little bit too quick to the trigger recording earlier tonight. We talked about it last week. We talked about it after the Kentucky-Georgia game. The Georgia just didn't have that go-to playmaking guy. Fitz, you always bring up 3rd and 5. Who's your guy? 3rd and 6. Who's your guy? I didn't know who that guy was for Georgia, but frankly, in the second half, even in a loss, we saw Arian Smith break out. We saw Dylan Bell. We saw Dominic Lovett come up with a bunch of big plays. Even Oscar Delp got involved at the tight end position. So I think that's a chapter in all of this. And a subset of that chapter is how in the hell did Alabama's defense let Georgia's offense get right back into this football game when it felt like they already had their feet, firmly grasped on the throats of this Georgia football team? That's a completely different conversation, Fitz.
Yeah, but there's one other that we haven't really given the love here when you talk about the chapters on this, and that is the Jalen Milroe best player in the country chapter. I mean, If we're being honest, what we saw today, and I'll give this note here, Jalen Milroe, the first player with 300 passing yards, 100 rushing yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns versus an AP top 5 opponent ever. You talk about how this game was won. This game was won because Jalen Milroe beat you with his legs. He beat you with his arm. Adam, we talked a lot last week about were they going to spy him. It didn't matter. There was nothing they were going to be able to do that was going to shut down Jalen Milroe. So when you look at it, just the way that Alabama won this football game, there are so many positives for them looking at, hey, we have, in my mind, tomorrow I'll be stunned if Jalen Milroe is not the Heisman frontrunner, and he should be. It usually goes to the quarterback of the best team that has the best performance. That was the best performance we've seen, hands down, throughout the course of the year against the best quality opponent for the course of the year. This was a statement-making game for Alabama, for Kalen DeBoer, but importantly for Jalen Milroe.
Jalen Milroe proved he's the best player in the country in this game. To be able to be as dynamic of an athlete as he is, and he can take it to the house every time he touches the football. And then to be as physical as he is running the football, but also the improvement for him in the passing game. He was 27 to 33 passing. He was accurate. He was efficient. He threw 1 interception, but it was at the end of the first half. I interviewed Jalen Milroe this summer when I was at Alabama, and he kept talking about how he felt disrespected, how everyone talks about him being just a running quarterback, and how his whole life growing up, everyone talked about him as he should move the wide receiver, he should play safety, he's not a quarterback, and how proving that he's a true passer in the pocket and can change the game with his arm was important to him. And he proved that in this game, and he's proved it all season long. He is a game changer at that position. And I want to give a lot of credit, I mentioned a little bit, to Nick Sheridan, Alabama's offensive coordinator, for what they've done with Jalen Milroe. Kalen DeBoer did it with Michael Penix Jr. And that offense and that system is so good at giving their quarterbacks confidence and making quarterbacks feel like they're in control and everything, and really getting the whole team and the system to believe in their quarterback. Penix was a completely different player when he went from Indiana to Washington. I think Jalen Milroe is a completely different player with Kalen DeBoer at Alabama, and the way that they use him in that offense, they allow him to be himself. They don't ask him to do too much. He's not sitting in the pocket and going read 1, 2, 3, 4. He's getting the ball out quick. He's on the move, and then he's running the football. It's what he does best, and that offense is built perfectly for him. And Jalen Milroe, there's no one at the quarterback position in college football that can play the way he can, and he proved that against Georgia. He's got one of the top defenses in the country.
That was a Heisman Trophy statement kind of game, that if, and I feel like I can say when we see Jalen Milroe in New York City at the end of the season, it's highlights from this game that are going to be played in kind of a way to show this is why he is here. This is why he's one of the best playmakers in the country. And in the fourth quarter, late in the fourth quarter, when it became a quarterback duel, that in every single possession you had to have it. Well, Jalen Milroe responded to a great touchdown drive from Georgia with a one-play 75-yard touchdown to Ryan Williams, who is a freak in his own right, and he's 17. if anybody didn't know.
Who knew? I didn't know that. No, they didn't mention
crazy,
that in the broadcast
in
at all.
case you listened to every broadcast on mute. And what did Carson Beck do to respond? He threw an interception, which just felt like the most perfect way to cap off Georgia's day of turning the ball over and sloppy play. Now, in terms of Georgia, the ceiling's still 11-1. Everything that Georgia wants to accomplish this season, getting to the SEC championship, winning the SEC championship, getting to the college football playoff, and winning a national championship, all of that still very much so is firmly in front of Georgia. But they have to clean up some of the sloppy play that we saw tonight in Tuscaloosa, Fitz.
Isn't this in so many ways a wake-up call? Because if you think about it,
do you need a wake-up call? Was Kentucky not a wake-up call?
No, see, but here's the thing. It's just wired in your DNA that you find a way to win. 42 straight regular season wins for Georgia coming into this game. All right, that's the longest streak we've seen since 1953 through 1957. Think about that, y'all. Like, you're talking about a long time. 28 straight wins in conference play, 16 straight wins on the road. This is a team that simply believes they can dig their way out of any hole that they're in. They can find a way. And that's a great belief to have. Hell, they almost did it in this game. That's fine. But if you're Kirby Smart, you get this moment to turn around and say, hey, boys, you're not as good as you think you are. Like, you went out there and got your ass kicked. We're lucky we were even back in this game. This does become this galvanizing moment for Georgia. Yeah, you're right. They got a lot to clean up. You're right. They're not as good. I don't think they showed tonight that they're not as good as Alabama. Like, we talk all the time. If these two teams played 10 times, Alabama, to me, would win this 7 out of 10 times, Breneman. Like, they are the better team right now. But that is still a wake-up call for Georgia. They can look around and say, hey, they're the better team today. But Caroline's right. Like, the playoffs are still right there for them.
And Fitz, I don't want to hear the nonsense from college football fans talking about how this game doesn't matter because of the 12-team playoff. And this game mattered to everyone that played in that game and everyone around those two programs. And trust me, it mattered to Kirby Smart and it mattered to Georgia fans in their first game against an Alabama team that doesn't have Nick Saban. We talked about it on the last show. Has Kirby Smart been 1-5, now 1-6 against Alabama, or was he 1-5 against Nick Saban? And now with Kalen DeBoer, to lose this game is demoralizing for Kirby Smart and this Georgia program. But if you're Georgia, you do have the 12-team playoff to look at, and you can now go to your team and say, listen, you guys aren't as good as you thought you were. You were reading all your own press clippings. Carson Beck, you need to play like the best quarterback in the country. You're not playing like it right now. You're playing like the 20th best quarterback in the country. You turned the football over way too much. We had way too many penalties. Sloppy football. Took a safety. You can't do it, and you're not going to win games. But the good news is you found a way to come back in this game, and you lost to a team that may be the number one team in the country come the AP poll this coming week by a touchdown, and we had a chance to win the game or tie the game in the red zone. So there's positives to take away from it. Some players grew up in this game. Some of those receivers stepped up. Carson Beck, I think, leaves this game with a little bit of confidence after throwing for 430 yards and leading this team back. And this looks like a more dynamic Georgia offense than the one we saw against Kentucky, against a much better defense that Alabama has. So I think there's pros to take out of this if you're Georgia. And now that you have the 12-team playoff, you're still alive. But I don't want to hear the nonsense from the fans, everyone tweeting about it, saying that this game doesn't matter, because it certainly matters in college football.
And I didn't want to hear from anyone saying that this game didn't have juice just because it didn't have as many implications as it had in the past. Please, if you didn't think this game had juice, that's a you problem.
There is one huge ramification to this game in playoff expansion that I think everybody's sleeping on. Let's remember the top two teams in the SEC are going to play for the SEC championship. There is no assurance at this point that that will include Georgia. So when you look at all of this, it could hinder their opportunity to win their conference. If they do not win their conference, they don't get home field advantage. They don't get a first round bye. So now if you're Georgia, you got to realize quickly that if you do end up playing Alabama 3 times, we said last week, there's a chance these two teams can face as many as 3 times. Well, there's a very real chance that if they play Alabama again, it's going to have to be at Alabama and not at Georgia. I think those are ramifications we need to start considering when you think about the way conference realignment has gone down, when you think of the way the conference championship games are going to go down. Like right now, I'm a lot more confident that we're going to see Texas v. Alabama in the SEC championship game, which means now they're going to have to go on the road if they're Georgia and win 4 straight road games in the playoffs. That's daunting. That is much more difficult.
Yeah, and it's a very fair point. And it's something that I think this early in the season, it's hard to get a fair picture of. That's something maybe week 9, week 10, week 11, we're going to start seeing individual teams pull away. But that's a very fair point that first round bye can be critical. Because at that point in the season, you're banged up, you've got injuries, and just avoiding a total, meltdown in a game and in the playoff, I think would be key. But I think, Adam, you brought up a very fair point about Carson Beck, that maybe he's stepping away from this game with a little bit of confidence. But I also look at it like the same guy that got you back in this game is this same guy that took you right out of it. Like the guy that brought you in this game is the reason why you were out of this game to begin with. The guy that brought you back into this game in the fourth quarter, it was one drive essentially that completely ended it when he handed the ball to Alabama at the end of the game. So yes, you saw good things from Carson Beck, and yes, you saw some playmakers start to emerge. That's what we wanted to see from this Georgia offense, was start to see some of those go-to guys. When Carson Beck's up against the wall in a have-to-have-it moment, who does he go to? We've seen some of those guys emerge, but it's still, I'm still very hesitant to make it sunshine and rainbows for Carson Beck when it's ultimately was the fatal mistake, not just at the end of the game, but the fatal mistakes that Carson Beck made throughout that entire game.
Carson Beck's mistakes early in the game concerned me a lot more than the one at the end of the game. He's trying to win the game in the fourth quarter, and you're taking a shot to the end zone, and the defensive back from Alabama made a great play. But his mistakes earlier in the game were bad. The fumble was bad in the second half. These are mistakes that Carson Beck, a guy who's a Heisman favorite, one of the top Heisman favorites, needs to clean up and should not be making with this much experience in his career. And I'll say this, I really believe that it is now one of the toughest challenges and biggest jobs of Kirby Smart's coaching career to find a way to get Carson Beck to play good football. Carson Beck has the talent. He is a great quarterback and has played a ton of football and won a lot of games in the SEC. But your job as a coach is to get your players to play their very best. And right now, Carson Beck's not playing his best. So I want to see what this Georgia coaching staff does with him at quarterback. Can they get him to play up to his capability? Can they make it simple for him? Because right now, Carson Beck in the first half of this game, he was inaccurate. He looked rattled, didn't look poised at all, looked better in the second half, but still at times didn't look fully confident in himself and in the system that he's playing in.
Isn't there some portion of that, though, that I have to lie squarely at the feet as credit to Kane Womack, the defensive coordinator of Alabama?
Without a doubt.
I mentioned earlier the change in their defensive philosophy, but I'll go back to the safety in the first half. We saw, he basically heaved the ball up to nobody because he was about to get murdered in the end zone. But the play before, he threw it right to a linebacker for Alabama, and I kept thinking in that moment, he's seeing ghosts. Like, he's confused to what he's seeing. And that, to me, we always talk about players, but sometimes we got to kind of step back and ask ourselves, why are good players suddenly playing bad football? And that, as much as we want to make it about, well, this guy sucks or this guy needs to get better, sometimes coaches win the chess match. I thought the defensive coordinator for Alabama won the chess match throughout the course of this game, and maybe Kalen DeBoer, maybe one of his best accomplishments as a head coach is the coordinators he brought with him, because this team, Adam, they just, like, schematically, they are beating people. They are being well coached from the sidelines.
Man, I do want to give Kalen DeBoer a ton of credit for what he's done at Alabama. And you just mentioned that the hire of Kane Womack, getting him to leave South Alabama as a head coach to be a defensive coordinator in college football, and what he did with bringing Nick Sheridan, his offensive coordinator, what he's done developing Jalen Milroe. Kalen DeBoer has proven now that he was the perfect guy to take over for Nick Saban. And it's not an easy thing to take over, right? You're in a program that has the GOAT and who's done things one way for a long time and won a ton of games. And Kalen DeBoer has had the humility, but he's stuck to who he is as a person, and he's taken over this team and this community, and everyone's really galvanized around him and believed in him. He has proven that he was the perfect hire. And then also, Kalen DeBoer took over this team, and a lot of kids hit the transfer portal, but he found a way to reload this roster, to develop the players that were on the roster, to now be one of the best rosters, maybe the best in college football. And then you add in Kalen DeBoer's offensive scheme and how it's getting these players and how it's getting Jalen Milroe to play the way he's playing. Kalen DeBoer has done a phenomenal job, and this is the biggest win of Kalen DeBoer's career. And he's proven now to me, guys, that he's one of the top 2 coaches in college football, without a doubt, with what he did at Washington and now what he's done through the first 5 weeks at Alabama to beat Georgia at home. He's proven that he's up there with the very best of them in our sport.
I think there's a very fair argument to make that Kalen DeBoer had the greatest recruiting job of the entire sport this past offseason in getting Jalen Milroe to stick around at Alabama. Jalen Milroe didn't have to stick around. Nick Saban retires. He could have gone anywhere he wanted to go in the country, and Jalen Milroe proved to be the difference maker against the number 2 team in the country. And let me just say, it's not fair. It is like Green Bay Packer quarterback level of unfair that the greatest coach in the history of college football retires, and then Alabama brings in a guy in his very first, game as a head coach in the SEC. He beats the number 2 team in the country. I mean, it is just.
You want to talk?
Some people get lucky.
There are what 3-year-olds in Alabama that have never seen their team win a Heisman? Like, what are we talking about here? Like, Jalen Milroe is going to turn around and absolutely again be in the Heisman conversation. And it's a reminder that, and by the way, I was wrong. I thought that the culture shift would take more time. I thought that Kalen DeBoer would lose some games he didn't necessarily want to lose, and I thought that this would all be an adjustment. I was wrong. There is no adjustment. It is alarming to me that Kalen DeBoer and the staff have come in, and somehow they are getting even better results out of some of this talent than Saban and a highly regarded crew did before him. So I'm looking at all this saying it's wildly unfair to be an Alabama football fan because, my God, every couple of years, I've got bananas that can't stay ripe, but somehow they got quarterbacks getting one Heisman's every week. Like, what the hell is happening in this world?
Fitz, I was wondering how long it was going to take for you to bring up you being wrong early in the season. I was going to bring it up at some point, but I'm glad you admitted it on your own.
Hey, there's still plenty of time. Like, they'll slip up.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
There's still time for a slip up. But yeah, I kept watching this today. I thought, man, as complicated, y'all, like, seriously, as complicated as we like to make college football, some things are easy. When you watch Texas is really stinking good. When you watch Alabama is really stinking good. In fact, I watched Ohio State today. They did not look, and we'll get into it later, they didn't look the same way in their victory over Michigan State that what we saw from Alabama looked. There are just some teams that you watch them and you're like, you know what? I'm going to make this simple. That's a damn good football team, and Alabama's one of them.
This is a great opportunity, too, for Kalen DeBoer to go to his team and show a lot of mistakes they made in this game where there's still things to clean up, where you get this was the perfect way to win if you're Kalen DeBoer. You dominated the first half, showed that you're better than them and you can beat them off the field, but then you don't play well, you let them come back and you find a way to win the game at the end and your defense makes a stop. I mean, Alabama had 3 penalties on the first drive of this game. Turnovers that can't happen. So Kalen DeBoer can still go to his team and say, you guys aren't as good as you thought you were when you were up 28-0, and still find a way to build something out of this and make sure the team gets better when
Adam, you talk about
they really need to.
Like, this is coaching cliche bingo. You're telling me somebody who coach, you got to start fast, all right? We got to play explosive football. We got to make sure we win the first quarter. You get all of that. And then it's like, we got to find a way to win tough games. We got to make sure that we play for 60 minutes. Like,
full
my
60
God.
minutes. That's my favorite.
The whole thing. It's amazing.
Saturday nights are for overreactions. This might be an overreaction. This might not be. Is Alabama the best team in the country?
I can't tell you how you beat Texas. I'm sorry. I don't even know the path. If somebody came to me today and said, what's the cheat code that my team needs to have to beat Texas? I can't come up with that answer. So to me, Texas is right now the most complete team in the country on both sides of the ball. They can hang with Alabama in every way. We did see some cracks in the armor today in the fourth quarter for Alabama. Adam, I still struggle. If I had an AP vote, I would put Texas at number 1. I would frankly put Alabama at number 2.
I'm putting Alabama at number 1 because the win against Georgia is better than any win Texas has. It's better than the win against Michigan. It's better, obviously, than anything else on their schedule. Alabama's offense is explosive. Their defense is elite. Alabama against Texas on a neutral site tomorrow. I'm taking Alabama in that game, and I'm putting Alabama at number 1 in the AP poll.
Ooh.
Spicy.
Is that hot of a take? I mean, did we watch the same Alabama team today?
No,
yeah,
it's
but
not
I mean,
a hot
Texas
take.
is out here with the backup quarterback doing their thing. Doing their
but
thing.
it's not
I don't know what
just
I
any backup quarterback. Don't you
Texas
even
has
call
2
him a
starting
backup quarterback?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
His
That's
last name is
disrespectful to Arch
Manning.
Manning.
For crying out loud. They're playing with a It's Arch Manning. Okay.
Still, Caroline, you're the tiebreaker. I say, you've heard each of our cases. You get to be the tiebreaker on this. Who's the number 1 team in all the land?
Texas is the number one team in all the land. But Alabama has a more impressive win. So it's kind of what's your argument? What do you value? Do you value this imaginary, if they played tomorrow on a neutral site, who would win kind of conversation? Or do you go off of the resume? Because Alabama clearly has the best resume. I mean, they have the best win in college football. They just beat Georgia. But I do agree that with a healthy Quinn Ewers, if Alabama and Texas played 10 times on a neutral site, I might say Texas wins 6, like narrowly. But we haven't seen Texas play a team the caliber of Georgia. I guess we've seen them play Michigan's defense, but obviously Michigan's offense has left a lot to be desired.
One of our favorite things on the show is to do the neutral site 10 games. Who wins how many?
The Hugh Freeze exercise, if you will.
Yeah.
We need to come up with a nickname for
no right answer.
Yeah.
We need to come up with this is by the way, like everything in college football. The reason I love college football is because every argument is the grown-up equivalent of my dad can beat up your dad, and they never actually fight. Like, my conference is better than your conference. Who the hell knows? Like, who would win on a neutral field? Like, this is all. Yeah, it's my dad can beat up your dad, and my dad wasn't very tough. So, I don't know what to say about that.
Fitz, you study the AP poll and all the voting that goes into it super well. Is there a chance that they put Bama number 1 in the AP poll, or is it for sure going to be Texas?
No, I think there's a real chance. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because for the very reason you talked about, like, we know that the voters value key wins. And so that's why we always see the voters value key wins, and they actually value good losses, which the committee's the same way. The committee's super into that was a quality loss, but the voters are the same way. So, like, if this game had ended up a blowout, then Georgia would fall. The fact that it ended up being so close, I don't think Georgia tumbles very far, and I do think that there's a real chance Alabama gets up to number 1. And I don't think that that's wrong either right now. That's the one thing I got to remind everybody, Caroline, is like this stuff works itself out. Like who cares who's number 1 this week? There's a little bit of calm down on it. I think you can make an argument for either side if you take your fan hat off.
I mean, at this point in the season, we all have a tendency to be incredibly overreactive and so week to week because this is a week to week league. Like, the transitive property of equality does not and has never applied in college football. Just look at Kentucky. I think that's the perfect example of that. All right, we'll get into one thing we learned coming up next after a quick break. All right, Adam, what did we learn this week?
We learned that Penn State is for real, has a lot of strengths, but also has a bunch of issues to clean up. So the good for the Penn State win against Illinois is that Drew Aller played efficient, didn't turn the football over. Tyler Warren, one of the best tight ends in the country. They use him at running back. They use him in the slot. They use him all over the field, and he's their best playmaker. The defense is stout. I thought Tom Allen called a great game for Penn State, and that Penn State proved that defense is one of the top in the country. The bad, though, 2 missed kicks. Both were 40-yard field goals. You're going to need a field goal kicker if you're going to make a run at the college football playoff. Penn State still lacks an explosive playmaker at wide receiver. And this doesn't look like the Andy Kotelnicki offense that we saw at Kansas. It wasn't explosive. Penn State doesn't have an elite wideout. Here's the truth. Penn State went out and got Julian Fleming in the transfer portal, former 5-star recruit, but he has been almost non-existent up to this point in the season. So Penn State doesn't have that outside receiver threat that can completely change the game. And then just some of the penalties that Penn State had, jumping off sides on the 4th down, a block in the back on a pick 6. This is the year for Penn State to make the college football playoff. This is the year everyone's been talking about for the last 4 or 5 years at Penn State. The last 3 years was that this was the year that Drew Aller and Nick Singleton and Katron Allen and Abdul Carter and all these guys who were 4 or 5-star recruits will now be 3 years into their college career. This is the year, 3-4 years into their college career. This is the year that it can happen. And James Franklin has done a phenomenal job, but those things have to be cleaned up because it gets real fast for Penn State. UCLA, USC, Wisconsin, Ohio State, the next 4 games for them. I was impressed with the win for Penn State today, but watching that game, there's things that need cleaned up if Penn State's going to make a run at the Big Ten title and make a run at a national championship.
I also think, to your point, Adam, one thing we talked about earlier in the week was the AP poll, who was ranked where. And I said Illinois was properly ranked. And I walked away from this game thinking, yeah, that's true. Like, a lot of times we look at Penn State, Illinois, and people that maybe aren't watching a lot of Big Ten will roll their eyes. Illinois is a pretty solid football team. They play tough football. This was a tough game, a tough win. I thought Drew Aller really hung through. He took some hits in this game, too, that were pretty vicious a couple of times. So I really felt like this was a good, solid win against a good, solid football team. And maybe they're not all as sexy as what we talked about for the beginning of the show. Maybe they're not all Georgia, Alabama, but man, I thought that this was a tough, gritty win against a tough, gritty opponent, and I walked away from it feeling good about Penn State, but also feeling like Illinois has sort of proven and they've arrived. They are kind of that mid-teens team throughout the course of the year that's going to be a problem for people.
From the Illinois perspective, my perception of this Illinois team hasn't changed. I expected Penn State to win this game because Penn State is tougher at the lines of scrimmage. Penn State just has more talent on that roster. But I think that Illinois is still a really good football team. The thing with Illinois, what they haven't done, what they did today, was they haven't committed that fatal mistake. I mean, Illinois, up until this point, has done a really great job of taking care of the football. I mean, Luke Altmaier threw his first interception of the season today, and Penn State was able to turn that into 7 points. If he doesn't make that mistake, well, then we're looking at a 14-7 ball game that could be going down to the wire. And then the game's essentially over when Illinois fumbles late in the fourth quarter. So they make that mistake. You don't want to see that, but I still think that this is a really good Illinois team that's just not quite there to compete with the big dogs in the Big Ten. And Penn State is a tough and gritty football team, and even when it's not pretty, they can find ways to win at them.
Yeah, but still, all those points are true. But when you're playing some of these teams in the Big Ten and to make a run at the Big Ten championship, Penn State's going to have to find a way to get some explosive plays on offense and get the ball down the field and push down the field. Same issue that I'm worried about Michigan. You have to find ways to get chunk plays. And right now, Penn State's best playmaker on offense, other than their running back Nick Singleton, is their tight end Tyler Warren. And I love tight ends. Listen, I love a good tight end. You don't want your tight end to be your most explosive player on offense. That's not what you want. You want a wide receiver that can take the top off of a defense. And Harrison Wallace had a good game, but Amari Evans, Penn State's other receiver, non-existent. I don't think he had a catch in this game. So Penn State has to find a way to make it happen. But I do think and agree with you guys, a lot to be excited about. And I thought Drew Aller played well enough to win a lot of games, and he didn't turn the football over, which is most impressive. But Caroline, what did you learn in week 5?
It's not really what I did learn, but more so what I didn't learn. I'm still not quite sure how good Notre Dame is. And yes, you get a good win at home against a really good Louisville team. I think I saw more explosive plays from Riley Leonard in the passing game than maybe we've seen over the past couple of weeks, and those are all good things. We're going to have to see kind of an evolution from this Notre Dame passing game if they do want to make some noise in the college football playoff. But I still am not quite sure how good of a team this is, because I felt so many times Notre Dame was putting that game on a platter for Louisville, whether it was silly penalties or dumb turnovers, and Louisville just wasn't taking it. And if Notre Dame's playing a better team, if Notre Dame's playing a team like a Texas or a Georgia or any teams that we just mentioned as national title contenders, like those teams take advantage of the mistakes that Notre Dame makes. So good win for Notre Dame. You survive in advance when the margin for error for Notre Dame is so thin. They can't afford to lose another game on the rest of their schedule. They took care of business. They got to win. You move on, go on to the next one. But I just still am not, I don't trust this Notre Dame team, Fitz.
I need to see more things happening on schedule. And that's just for me, an offense that is Riley hanging in there and somehow delivering a tough throw that you look at and say, wow, how did that happen? Or squiggling his way around and running around with the football to make something happen. That's not, that can't be your bread and butter, Adam. There has to be some level of, I see the timing. I understand what the offense is doing. I understand how they're executing it. The speed and release, all these things matter to me. And I just don't see enough of that from Notre Dame to make me super comfortable. I feel like right now, even in this game, they're just going to fly by the seat of their pants, hope Riley can make a play, hope they can get something happening downfield. And that comes down to better separation from guys. That comes down from better timing in the offense. I don't feel any of that to really feel like Notre Dame is in the category of good.
The number one tell for a balanced offense to me when I look at the stat sheet and watch film is how they perform on third down. because third down's the money down in football, and you have to be balanced on first and second down to be good at third down. A lot of times third down is really about what you did on first and second. Notre Dame in this game was 2 of 10 on third down, and that's not going to win you a bunch of football games. They're lucky they won the game against Louisville being 2 of 10 on third down. Also lost time of possession. Also had almost half the amount of first downs that Louisville had in this game. So Notre Dame has to find some balance on offense, and I just want to see Riley Leonard get more comfortable in this system. He's made plays. He made some big throws in this game, in the second half especially. He's now had back-to-back games where he's run and thrown for a touchdown. But the consistent plays on first and second down where they stay ahead of the sticks and put their whole offense in a good position has not been there. They've been way too up and down, way too many mistakes on first and second down to make me comfortable about Notre Dame moving forward. And you mentioned it, Caroline, the margin of error is so small for Notre Dame. They only have one ranked team left on their schedule, USC, but to sit here and think that they're going to make it through the rest of the year clean, I can't confidently say that with what I've seen out of this Notre Dame offense.
Fitzy, what we learn?
Couple of things. Number one, I learned that Breneman can say the phrase, "I'm a fan of a good tight end," and I cannot giggle like a child. So I feel like adulthood has hit
Who
me
doesn't
today.
love a good tight end?
Everyone likes a nice tight end, man.
Beefy five-layer burrito loves a good tight end. You know what I mean?
Anything else you want to
You
tell us
guys
there?
are children.
You're welcome. Look, I'm just impressed I made it through and I didn't giggle. The other thing is everybody can raise a glass. We've made it this far into the show, roughly a half an hour into the show, before we've said culture or identity. But it's time to
Growth.
say that. Thank you. I feel like we learned exactly who Michigan is. You do it once, I look at it. You do it twice, I think, You do it 3 times, now we know who you are. Michigan, as a football team, is going to win ugly games where they are not going to rely on whoever is playing quarterback to really throw the ball, but they are going to run the ball consistently down your throat, and they're going to be willing to take 3 yards. There are so many offenses, I think, in today's college football landscape that are willing to give up everything to try and move the ball down the field with chunk plays. That is not who Michigan is, and I love the fact that they have embraced that. They went into this game against Minnesota. The final score was closer than the actual game was, and they went into this game with Minnesota, and it's clear, yet again, for another week in a row, that they were absolutely intent on running the football and shutting the run down. You are not going to run on Michigan, and they are going to run on you. That is we asked at the beginning of the year, who is Michigan now? I think we have an identity for it. Is it pretty? Does it look dominant? No, it's kind of ugly. It might set football back 30 years, but I love the fact that they know who they are, they're embracing who they are, and they're winning football games by being exactly that and not trying to be anything else, Adam.
Fitz, Michigan's identity is that they're not very good at football right now. I don't like what I've seen out of their identity, especially in the last 2 games against USC.
But they're winning. They're winning.
Yeah, yes. But here's the concerns. Listen, Alex Orji, 80-some yards passing and an interception. First of all,
Ew.
when you're not throwing the football hardly at all, you certainly shouldn't be throwing interceptions. Defense allowed 21 points in the fourth quarter to Minnesota. The only bright spot on Michigan's offense was Claire Mullings, who ran for another 100-yard game. And yes, I like that they have the identity where everyone knows they're going to run the ball and they still can run it at times. But when you play football like that, when you're gonna run the football and play the time possession game, that means you can't make mistakes in any other part of the game. That means your defense has to play great. Your defense can't go up 21 points in the fourth quarter. You can't play bad on special teams. They had a block punt in this game. They only scored 6 points in the second half of the game. So the formula for Michigan only works if every other part of the equation is there. If they only run the football and they're not playing good defense, they're not playing good on special teams, then it's not going to work. And I still think that Michigan at 4-1, they are not as good as that 4-1 record says. 2 ugly wins against USC and Minnesota. You guys know my thoughts on the USC win that they had. This team has to find a way to find balance on offense, clean up the mistakes on defense, and if they do, they can have a chance to make a run at this thing. But until I see some kind of resemblance of an explosive offense in the passing game and then a defense that can get stops and clean up all the mistakes, I'm not a believer in Michigan until I see them fix that kind of stuff.
Look,
Caroline.
I don't think
I'm not a believer they're a playoff team. Let me be clear here. I'm just a believer that they've figured out who they are. Who they are to me is probably barely a top 20 team. Offensively, it doesn't really look like a top 20. I want to be clear. I'm not sitting here saying Michigan has become a juggernaut, but at least they've identified what they're trying to do to me, Caroline.
Well, I think Michigan's identity is today against Minnesota 3.6 yards per carry. You know what that is? Times 3? I don't know, but it's more than 10. Like, that's their identity. Is like any other team in America, if you are a very run-forward team, 3.5 yards a crack doesn't get it done. But for Michigan, it's fine. Well, 3.5 on first down, 3.5 on second down, 3.5 on third down. That's a first down. And that's how Michigan's going to run their offense. It's incredibly boring. It is a snooze fest of football, but that's who they are. And Adam, you say you want to see some sort of, evolution in the passing game. You want to see some explosive plays. You're not going to see that. And if you do, truly, I think it'll be a college football miracle if we start to see Alex Orji airing it out in a single pass and as many, attempts or as many, yards he's throwing for in a single game. He had 42 passing yards against USC. The day that we see a 42-yard touchdown pass from Alex Orji will be a day that, frankly, I'll make some of these bets that college football fans are making on Twitter.
I always say people in hell want ice water. People in hell want ice water. I want to be 6'3". Like, we all have wants. So they have to. Like, yeah, it's great.
But I don't think Michigan even wants to. Right. Like, I think they like it.
They're going to figure out how to be a balanced passing team after they have a couple of more recruiting classes in 2 years when they can actually throw the football. It ain't going to be this year, but at least they're committed to something. That's all. I'm out here backhanded throwing praise.
I think it's a good point, Fitz. I understand what you're saying. They have an identity, but the reason that teams around the country don't like running the ball for 3 yards a pop or 4 yards a pop is because if you do that, the margin of error gets extremely slim, and it is tough to run 15-play drives down the field and not make mistakes and not turn the football over. Every single play you run, the percentage of mistakes and turnovers goes up in football. So that's why it's so hard. And then Michigan doesn't play disciplined football, and I don't think they need a huge passing attack, but you have to be able to throw it a little bit. You got Army, Navy, and Air Force throw the football down the field. You have to be able to throw it at some point down the field and not turn it over, and they haven't shown that they can do that. So those are my concerns on Michigan. You guys know I've been bearish on Michigan this entire year. So we'll see where it pans out come week 12.
It's not a good brand of football, but it is a brand of football nonetheless. All right, stock report on the other side. We'll take a quick break here. All right, Adam, whose stock is up?
Stock up, I am going with Indiana. Indiana 5-0, just beat Maryland 42-27 or 28.
Windiana.
I mean, Kurt Cinetti has
let's just calm it down a little bit. Go ahead.
Kurt Cinetti has got Indiana playing some really good football. I mean, some of the best in the Big Ten right now. And think about where this program was, guys. 3-24 is their Big Ten record over the past 3 years. Right now, they're 5-0, averaging 48 points a game. Their quarterback, Curtis Rourke, who transferred in from Miami of Ohio, has been lights out all season. He threw for almost 400 yards on Saturday against Maryland, had 3 touchdowns. And then in this game against Maryland, they faced some adversity and got over it right away. So that was good to see because it had been pretty easy for him during the season to this point. But Kirk Cinetti has brought some swagger and some momentum into this Indiana program. And you look at their schedule ahead, they have winnable games. Not a bad schedule in the Big Ten. They're going to position themselves at a Big Ten title run. They're there. This is a top team in the Big Ten, in the top tier in the conference, with up there with the top 4 or 5 teams that are going to make a run at this thing. And Kurt Cinetti is a winner. He's done it everywhere he's been. He said in his opening press conference, "I win, Google me," and he's proven that already at Indiana with a 5-0 start. So I want to give some love to the Hoosiers.
This
Google
is like a
me
bi-weekly
is the
tradition here. The bi-weekly, we're putting some random team in the Big Ten championship game. It was Nebraska, now it's Windiana. What are we doing? Like, what are we doing?
Have you watched any Indiana games, man? They're playing lights out. They're playing lights out.
I love the fact that I'm sitting here trying to find a way to polish a pig on Michigan, and you're like, no. But then when Indiana wins some games, you're like, well, Indiana.
One of them's 5-0 and is 48 points a game and has a great offense. One of them can't throw the ball 10 yards down the field. So
it's your team du jour. If it's not Rutgers, it's Nebraska. If it's not Nebraska, it's Indiana. Just some quality Big Ten football. But
don't sleep on Rutgers either. Rutgers is undefeated right now too. Rutgers is 4-0.
I'm not sleeping on Rutgers. I'm fully awake on Rutgers.
I am officially sleeping on Rutgers. I should watch what I say here before I get to my stock up. But I'm officially sleeping on Rutgers. Undefeated, doesn't matter. Miss me with all the undefeated talk. We got plenty of football left.
Jason Fitz officially sleeping on Rutgers. But whose stock is down, Adam? Because surely it's not Rutgers.
Yeah, my stock down is going to be Ole Miss and Jaxson Dart. Lost 20-17 against Kentucky. I was disappointed in this game because I've been a big fan of Jaxson Dart and how he plays the quarterback position and with the confidence and the swagger, plays like a dog. He did not play like one against Kentucky. He was inconsistent in the key moments in the game. His stat sheet looks decent. He was 18 of 25 or 26, 27, something like that. But in the biggest moments of this game, he did not play well. And at quarterback, you're judged by what you do in the big moments. He couldn't convert on the possible game-winning drive on the fourth down. But the most upsetting part was some of the critical mistakes he made on the drive to win the game. They had the ball down 3 points with a drive to win the game at the end of that. He took a sack on 2nd down and 10, which is cardinal sin of a 2-minute drive to win the game. You cannot take a sack. They were in field goal range, and he took the sack and knocked them out of field goal range, completely changed the game. They got back in field goal range and missed the field goal. The other thing he did was there was a free play. The defense jumped off sides. They snapped the ball. He had a free play and didn't take a shot to the end zone, didn't even throw the football on that play. I mean, you have to get rid of the ball there and at least try to get the ball down the field. You have a chance to throw it and you can turn it over and make a risky throw because you have the defensive penalty. Didn't do that. So those are little things that don't show up on the stat sheet. But if you want to be one of the best quarterbacks in the country, you have to play better than that. And I just thought Jaxson Dart would play better in big moments, and because of how he played, they missed the field goal to tie the game, and Ole Miss has one of the worst losses of the Lane Kiffin era.
Yeah, and can we also acknowledge that, I mean, to be real, Lane Kiffin got outcoached in this game. Yeah. And that's a concern. Like, to be fair here, and I picked Ole Miss to be in my national championship game. I love the offensive ability of this team. I really felt like we'd see explosiveness. We see them take on their first real opponent of the year, and they looked hesitant. Everything. They got no flow. They got no rhythm. I love the way you described Jaxson Dart's play in this game. I felt like he was holding and not trusting. It just felt like he wasn't trusting what he was seeing, and as a result, we got less than the best version of him. But I also look at that and say, how much of that lies at the feet of Lane Kiffin? Part of what I love in the new college football platform are quarterbacks and head coaches that know each other and have consistency with each other and communication with each other. They couldn't get out of each other's way in this game. So I look at Jaxson Dart and I look at Lane Kiffin and I say, how could you? With as much as it was on the line and what's still left in your schedule to come, like, how could you lose this football game? I think if I'm an Ole Miss fan today, I am absolutely beyond disappointed that the team dropped this one. I'd excuse some of the other losses. You should have beat Kentucky.
You know, Adam, you say that Jaxson Dart didn't play like a dog in this game. I disagree. He did play like a dog. It was just, he played like a poodle. He played like one of those like itty bitty little like white crusty dogs that you're like.
I was wondering where you're going with that.
Yeah, he played like a itty bitty little chihuahua, like a yippy little chihuahua that a big dog could just eat with one bite. We talked about this in the midweek podcast, like they ain't played nobody, Paul, kind of teams. Ohio State was in that conversation. Ole Miss was in the conversation. And Ole Miss led nearly every single offensive statistical category in the country. That they had explosive plays, that Jaxson Dart was averaging, like 450 passing yards a game. Like, this Ole Miss offense was so incredibly explosive. And the first resemblance of a test that they get at home, mind you. And to continue with the dog comparisons, Jaxson Dart just tucked his tail. And credit to Kentucky, because they got after Jaxson Dart. But that kind of brings me to my stock up. Mark Stoops. My goodness. Stock up to Mark Stoops. And Mark Stoops is the longest tenured coach in the SEC. He got his marquee win. Kentucky's gotten big wins under Mark Stoops in the past, but this on the road against the 6th-ranked team in the country, that is Mark Stoops' marquee win with a fan base that's grown really, I think, kind of tired of constantly being 7-5 and 8-4 and having that one, 10-2 kind of season pop up at once every 8 to 10 years. And credit to Mark Stoops. 2 weeks ago, Georgia came to Lexington. It was an incredibly close game. Kentucky had the ball. It was 4th and 8, and Mark Stoops decided to punt. And I disagreed with that decision when it happened. And everybody said, well, they're playing really tough defense and they're playing into their identity. And all of that is great. And all of those are very fair points. But you have the number one team at the time in the country on the ropes. You have an opportunity to put the game away and you punt the ball away. Mark Stoops learned from that mistake. It's 4th and 7, game is on the line, and you're backed up at your own, I think it was 25 yard line. They decide to go for it, and Brock Vandegrift delivers a beautiful pass, and it was either to set them up for a touchdown or it was a touchdown pass, and that ended up being the game for Kentucky. So I loved the decision from Mark Stoops to be aggressive there. That goes against everything that he believes in. He's a very conservative, run the ball, play tough defense kind of coach, but I loved the decision from him to be a little bit risky there, especially after what they saw against Georgia. And also, I want to point this out here because I think that this is the story of the game. Time of possession. Kentucky had the football for 40 minutes. They just grinded the clock out. Ole Miss, frankly, and they got the ball, they scored. Kentucky just grinded the clock out and they played their brand of football. I love to see that from Mark Stoops, Fitz.
Also, look at what's coming for them. They got Vandy at Florida, Auburn, Tennessee, which will be tough, Murray State. They should win 4 of their next 5. So this is a team right now that's 3-2, but I could easily see them all of a sudden they're 7-3, and we're talking about Kentucky with a little bit different tone in our voice. You're right. As much as I joked about Windiana earlier, Kentucky is that program that I think a lot of people could look at and say, hey, if we invest in facilities and if we start to invest in what football looks like around this campus, and then we invest in a coach that we get to buy in and we find a way to keep investing in that coach so he stays for an extended amount of time, which is more difficult than we give credit for, you can build a team that's consistent. And Caroline, I hear you because Kentucky fans are certainly loud now that they want more, but I would remind Kentucky fans to go back and look at what it looked like pre-Mark Stoops, because there was a point where Kentucky football was a joke for a generation. They are no longer a joke, and they may not be a great football team, but they are constantly a well-coached, well-put-together, good football team. And Adam, I think that needs to be praised right here. Like, this is a huge win for Kentucky. It's a huge win for Stoops. It also is a reminder that you can build a program that can do this.
And you can build a program the right way for a long period of time and buy into your coach and stay with him through the ups and downs, and good things end up happening. Now, have they gotten to the elite tier of the SEC? No. But they've had some big wins under Mark Stoops. And Caroline, I thought your point about the 4th down and 7 call was perfect. I mean, to think about that goes against everything Mark Stoops stands for as a coach, and to almost by making that decision, admitting he was wrong against Georgia when he did it, probably did some self-evaluation and said, I can't make the same mistake twice. To go for it there on 4th and 7 in your own territory with 4 minutes left in the game, you still have 3 timeouts, and where, instead of just trusting your defense to really allow Brock Vandegrift to go out there and play, and they convert it for the big explosive pass. So I thought that showed Mark Stoops evolving as a coach and having that willingness to take some risk. And then Kentucky's defense, and Mark Stoops has his hands all over that defense, helping call some of those plays. I mean, to hold Ole Miss to 100-some yards in the first half, I saw some stat that it was the fewest ever for a Lane Kiffin coach team in the first half. So I thought Mark Stoops had a great plan. And that's what happens when you play the style of play that Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin play. If you don't move the ball, you get 3 and outs, you get first down and out, and then you get killed in time possession because they play so fast. You look up and there's a minute off the clock and you ran like 7 plays. So Mark Stoops coached this game really well, and now Mark Stoops this season has played Georgia to the wire on the road, a top 10 SEC team, and now has a win against Ole Miss and a top 10 team. So definitely good call there, Caroline, on Kentucky. Now I want to hear who's the stock down of the week, Caroline.
Stock down is not a team or a player or a coach, but rather maybe refereeing in what we saw on Friday night in Miami. End of the game, Virginia Tech has to have it. Receiver comes down with what is called a catch, the game-winning touchdown. And that would have been a massive win for Virginia Tech against a top 10 Miami team after Virginia Tech dropped week 1 against Vanderbilt. It's called a catch. It's called a touchdown. What you need when the call on the field is a catch is conclusive evidence beyond a shadow of a doubt to overturn that call. And I don't think what we got was conclusive evidence beyond a shred of a doubt that that was in fact not a catch, yet the referees overturned it. So stock down to whatever the hell conclusive evidence means. Because if you want to argue if it was a catch or not, that's fine. We can argue about that all day long. But the call in the field was a catch. The issue that I have is overturning the call. I do not think that that was fair at all. Frankly, Fitz, I thought Virginia Tech got screwed by the refs on that one.
Yeah, 100%. And the fact that so many people can watch it and debate it tells you it's not conclusive.
Right.
It's just super simple. If you get 10 people together and we can't agree on it, then there's something inconclusive about it. And I watched that replay every way I could. I watched it in slow motion every way I could. I sat there and just looked on social media every way I could. I can't tell you. I can tell you this. I probably wouldn't have called it a touchdown. But I also can tell you that there's nothing there that makes me definitive in what I'm seeing that changes it. And y'all, like, the other part of this is this was a conference game. Right? Like, this will matter
Huge
to who
game.
wins the ACC. This will matter to the college football playoff. Like, this is why there has to be some sort of governing body that's looking over these things that says, hey, we're going to take this booth and we're like, one group is going to look at this. They need to be transparent. I covered the XFL when it first came back. And the great thing about the XFL is that you sat there, you actually got to hear the replay official in the booth tell you why they were calling what they were calling and what they were calling and what they saw. And it ended conspiracy theorists. And by not having that level of transparency, which college football and the NFL should have, by not having that level of transparency, all of a sudden you lead to everybody just talking about the result the wrong way. Like this, it's a bad look for college football. It's a bad look for the college football playoff. It's a bad beat for Virginia Tech. It's just bad all the way around.
Here's my question for you two is, with the rules written the way they are about how the call on the field is so important, and in order to overturn the call on the field, you have to have indisputable video evidence. So that call on the field is critical to what ends up being the final call. Why are we asking referees in end of game scenarios where they can't see anything that's going on to make that call on the field? I think we need to look at this completely from a new angle and say, in these Hail Mary end of game situations, does it make sense when there's just a mosh pit of people, a pile of people, for the refs even to make a call on the field at the end of the game? Or should it go to video replay right away to see what actually happened? That way we're not sitting here, because what we're really debating is, I see why they overturned it. But what I don't see is that it was indisputable video evidence that absolutely overturned the call on the field. But we're putting all this weight on the call on the field, but the referees don't even have a good angle. They have no clue what's going on down there. So it's really tough to ask the refs to make that call when that call is so crucially important to what actually ends up being the final decision made. So I don't know what the exact solution is, but I feel like with all the emphasis we put on the call on the field, that we need to rethink how those calls are made in end-of-game situations or critical moments, especially when multiple things, whether it's like the mosh pit of like running the football on the goal line where the refs can't really see if it gets in or not and have to make a call from the other side. Like, they don't know where the ball is. And then things like a Hail Mary, it's tough when we're asking refs to make that call when that ultimately is the call that needs to have indisputable evidence to overturn.
It's a very, very fair point. And I think it's getting to the actual root of the problem. Because you said the refs didn't have a good angle. There were about 10 different camera angles that didn't have a really great angle either. Enough for there to be this, this big debate on social media about, was it a catch? Was it not a catch? Well, if we can't determine that based off of slowing it down frame by frame, zooming in, zooming out, looking at all the different angles, then yeah, obviously a referee's not going to be able to see that in real time. I don't know what that looks like. Is that in a only Hail Mary situations? Is that, last 2 minutes of the game? I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I think that's a very fair point. Is the root of the issue was it a catch or not? The root of the issue is the call on the field initially, Fitz.
Robot ref. There we go. Put a robot ref with robot eyes on it, stands on the sideline, stands right at the end zone, the line of the end zone. I'm all in for robot ref. Robot ref takes over. All
I
of a
don't
sudden
want
we can
robot
zoom
ref. No,
just one extra robot ref.
I don't want one. We can take the little, Missouri robot dog that plays on the sidelines before every game. Just make that the robot ref.
I want robot ref that stands on the side and like the vision goes, and then we can see right in, and then all of a sudden it's like, bam, we're gonna defer to robot ref, and they can live take us into the eyesight of the robot ref. We can see it.
I can already hear so many college football fans, say, what happened to the game that I love when the robot ref calls, not a catch.
All I would say is that the good thing is we can all go to the college football commissioner and they can look at this and figure out the best path forward.
Exactly.
Oh, wait, we don't have a college football commissioner.
I would gladly take the job.
Yeah. Fitz for college football commissioner. I'll start the campaign right now.
Yeah, I'd vote for you. It's also really great that same commissioner can say, yes, UNLV players, you absolutely can sit out the rest of the season because of your NIL. Totally. That's, completely kosher. Fitzy, who stocks up?
So I'll give you a weird stock up because I just made fun of teams that are actually good in the Big Ten. I got stock up in a blowout loss for Michigan State. And that stock up goes to Jonathan Smith, particularly the coach of Michigan. It's been a long time since I watched a Michigan State offense that felt like it was even competent. If we're being real, it's been a long time since like Kenneth Walker III and the great year they had under Mel Tucker saved that offense repeatedly. Like they weren't good. It's just Kenneth Walker was absolutely great. I watched a team in the first half, and for anyone that didn't watch this game, and all you look at is the box score, I watched Michigan State drive down the field, go for a 4th and 1 and deep in Ohio State territory. They didn't get it. Right. Then the next drive, they had the chance to intercept Will Howard in the end zone. They drop it. The next play turns into a 4th down touchdown. Then you go in a drive later, and Michigan State's driving down the field. They're deep in Ohio State territory. They fumble the ball. A couple drives later, they fumble the ball again deep in Ohio State territory. These are all mistakes. But don't get it twisted. For the majority of the first half, Michigan State went toe-to-toe and blow-to-blow with Ohio State for everything they had. That defensive line played like monsters, just absolutely great. The TFL for them has been great. The quarterback pressures for them has been great so far this season. I think Michigan State is actually building something. Like, in order to get to the point that you are Indiana or Kentucky, you got to get out of the sea of suck first. And I think Michigan State has been in the sea of suck for a long time. And I watched the first half of that game. Again, everything fell apart in the second half. This turned into a blowout. But for the first half, I watched it and thought, man, Michigan State is actually starting to build a foundation of something better than I expected. So nobody's paying attention, but I think over the next couple of years, we are seeing the beginnings of what could be a really nice chapter for Sparty.
That's a great call, Fitz. The hire for Michigan State to bring in Jonathan Smith is one of the best hires of the offseason. When I was coaching at Arizona State, we played Oregon State every year, and I mean, playing Oregon State, when you played his teams there, you knew that you were playing a physical, hard-nosed football team that maybe didn't have as much talent, but that they were going to make you hurt at the end of the game. And our players didn't like playing Oregon State. That's the kind of culture he built, and that's what he's going to do at Michigan State. And I was shocked that Jonathan Smith took that job because he played at Oregon State and then left to go to Michigan State. So shows me that there's buy-in from the administration and that they're trying to do it the right way. And to your point, Fitz, Michigan State played well in this game in the first half, and it really gives me some concern also about Ohio State and how well they're going to play against tough opponents. Ohio State's had such an easy schedule. Are they getting a little lackadaisical? I went on this rant about Will Howard last week on the show and how Will Howard is one of the best in the country and deserves to be in the Heisman conversation, then goes out and doesn't play all that well in the first half, throws an interception. I didn't think that the offensive line played particularly well in the first half, so I think there's concerns about Ohio State, but I want to give, to your point, Fitz, a ton of credit to Michigan State for what Jonathan Smith is building and just the take a shot culture that he has in that program already in year one, Caroline.
This is shocking after a Kirby Smart game. Colorado had a great game today. Of all the culture conversations that we could have had, we've only taken
Michigan
2 collective shots. It's crazy. I will just there's a lot of Big Ten love on the program today. I don't know what we're doing. There's a bunch of Big Ten pom-pom wavers over here. Well, I'm just saying.
It's absolutely crazy that Fitz gave me crap for bringing up Indiana and his stock up is Michigan State. Michigan State losing by 30.
Routed.
I will admit, my stock's down on my takes. I'll admit that. while we're talking about
self-evaluation.
it's 100%. I'll watch the film, guys. I'll be better next week. We got to make sure we finish. It's a full 60-minute game. While we're taking shots, let's take one for culture and my stock down conversation, because my stock down is to everybody that doubted UNLV. You mentioned it earlier. This all happened after we were no longer on the air. I'm the first to admit I am from Vegas. Obviously, UNLV is a team that I care about. So I follow UNLV a little bit more than most people. I will be the first to admit that. But also, I dug into the UNLV NIL scandal a lot more than most people did. And it should be noted, there are a lot of conflicting reports on what the quarterback asked for when he left the program, how he asked for it, whether or not the agent that represents him is even board certified in the state of Nevada, which, by the way, would make it illegal for UNLV to interact with him at all. So people spent days trashing UNLV for the report that they didn't pay $100,000, which, again, has never even been confirmed. And a casino mogul actually came in and said, I will pay the $100,000. And UNLV said, no, you can't do that. And I sat here and thought, what's it going to mean? Because UNLV's taking on Fresno State. You know what it meant? Nothing. Because at the end of the day, Barry Odom's got these guys playing. They are playing hard. That offense and their offensive coordinator with the go-go offense they work is hard to shut down. They can beat you a million different ways, and they beat the snot out of Fresno State. And don't get it twisted. There is still a very real chance with the highest-ranked Group of 5 team going to the college football playoff. UNLV lost their starting quarterback, went out, played the toughest game that they played so far this year, kicked the snot out of them, and still has a chance at being in that conversation. So my stock down is to everybody that thought NIL was going to take over the UNLV program, that you could suddenly doubt UNLV for what they're doing. My stock down is to all the haters. Woo!
That was good. That got me fired up.
There we go.
I'm rooting for UNLV the rest of the year.
Let's go.
Whoa.
Let's go. You look like Lee Corso on College Game Day. You're officially pledging your allegiance to UNLV putting the helmet
looks good
on
me. I'm not gonna lie. Send me more stuff, UNLV.
I like the chrome helmet.
No, it's quality helmet.
Bring the chrome helmets back.
Fitz, Brendan Marion, their offensive coordinator, is the real deal with that offense. Yep. He's one of the best play callers in the country. It's only a matter of time until he's the head coach in college football or a coordinator at a Power 4 big time program. But he did a great job, and I thought one of the coolest parts was one of the UNLV players. I don't know who it was. I'm sure you saw it, Fitz. In his press conference after the game, said whatever donor said they would give $100,000 to Matt Sluka, the quarterback. Can we please give that to our offensive line for the way they played today? So you see how Barry Odom's building that program, and shutting down Mikey Keene in Fresno State is not an easy task, and the defense played well as well.
I feel like there's every single year one of these Group of 5 programs that just becomes like America's team. It's been Coastal Carolina so many times, App State whenever they come up with a massive upset once every few years. It feels like the country has kind of galvanized around this UNLV program, obviously making headlines this past week with Matthew Sluka. I saw a running back on their team also decided to opt out throughout the rest of the season.
It's like the fourth stringer.
Yeah, it's like, what are you doing demanding NIL money?
Yeah,
talk about self-awareness.
He opted out because he wasn't getting the opportunities on the field, not because it had anything to do with money, which he clarified. But still, that did lead to the pile-on. Yeah, there was certainly there's a pile-on.
It was bad timing to announce that you were opting out for that. I'm not going to say opting out. You're redshirting throughout the rest of the season, just like on the coattails of the Matthew Sluka news. So I feel like after that, so much of the country has like galvanized around this program of, trying to salvage what could be for the rest of the season, and obviously making a statement win after being in the headlines for the wrong reasons this season or this past week, I think is a great indication of what UNLV season could eventually become. Also stock up to people who follow through on their bets. I don't know if you saw St. Bill Snyder. If you recognize that name, you're on the internet too much. Log off, take a walk, get some fresh air. St. Bill Snyder is the Kansas State fan that said he was going to shove a beefy 5-layer burrito up his ass if Kansas State lost to BYU. He delivered, and he provided photographic evidence on Twitter. I spent a lot of time. Beefy 5-layer burrito up his ass. I almost sent it to you, but I also didn't want it to become like, it's a little sketchy.
Wait, did you see it?
Yeah, I looked.
I'm looking at it right now.
I looked at it, and here's what I can't decide. I can't decide if I actually believed he shoved the burrito up his butt or did he cut the burrito off and he was just sort of holding it between the cheeks. I don't know. I can't confirm or deny this. Like, I'm glad I didn't get a video of the actual shoving, but there was a part of me that was like a little bit, I don't know, because it's a lot of burrito. It's a lot of burrito.
Eats a lot of burrito, but he doesn't
Please call this episode, and please call this a lot of burrito.
Evidence. Yeah. Upon photographic evidence, he doesn't look like he is clenching too hard to keep the burrito.
Yeah, but he's also turning around and kind of giving a thumbs up. And with that much beefy burrito, I don't think you're giving it's just, he felt a little too comfy. A little too comfy. For that much, Adam's looking it up now. Like,
I mean,
I was gonna say, can one of you text it to me, please?
this is look.
You don't want to see my Twitter searches right now.
Beefy 5-layer burrito butt. Guy who shoves beefy 5-layer burrito up his butt. My favorite part, though, it's not even just the photos he has a Taco Bell bag over his head, which good call. The next tweet is, wife found out I'm cooked.
Yeah. And look, if she didn't know, that's one of those things you clear with your lady. Like, you clear with your significant other. If you are going to be on the internet because you're shoving a 5-layer burrito up your behind, you should probably talk to your significant other. Like, there are certain times in a relationship you got to sit down and say, hey, babe, we need to have a serious conversation. This feels like one of them. Like, that's not the sort of thing that your wife suddenly finds out a week later at work when it's like, hey, did your husband? Is that like, that just feels like that's a bad move. Maybe communicate that in advance.
They don't teach that in couples therapy. Hey, if you are planning on shoving Taco Bell up your butt, you might want to discuss that. Just talk that through. They don't teach that. It's just more of a feel thing.
I also feel like if you need to have that taught to you, you have much bigger issues. Like, hey, like, I don't know how do you bring that up to your therapist either, where you come in here and like, hey, question, I got this burrito butt thing, and I'm just wondering if you could help me figure it out.
If I had $1 every time somebody told me they had a burrito butt issue, man, I'd have $1, but it's weird that I would have $1. Oh man! So shout out to St. Bill Snyder. That's gonna do it for us today. What a great day in college football. You can follow him on Twitter at Adam Breneman81. That's at Jason Fitz. I'm at Caroline Fenton 1. Like the podcast, review it, subscribe, tell a friend, tell a Georgia fan. They probably need some T's and P's and some love today. Tell a UNLV fan. You know, Fitz is now the official mascot of UNLV.
He looks like a real football player.
He really does.
Right. Yeah. I've been working out.
The tinted visor?
Yeah.
I like it. Let's go Rebels. But appreciate y'all for stopping by. We'll be back Wednesday morning. We're out.